Hi. After a couple of my last jam videos, I have had a few very interesting conversations with fellow producers and YouTubers about their live setups, about MIDI and about the sync. These conversations made me realize that a lot of producers follow very similar thought process when creating their first setup and make quite similar mistakes in doing that. With this channel approaching 100 subscribers, I thought I would do something different this time and make an informative video where I explain how my setup works, how all the boxes are connected, and how I control everything. If you have just started building your hardware setup, or maybe you're just thinking about it, this video might help you to plan a few things in advance so that you don't make the same mistakes that I have. I always find it helpful to have a simple diagram that I can use to reference things at any time. As your setup grows, it makes it easier to plan things and to remember how devices are connected to each other. When I was planning this setup, I had 3 guidelines in mind. Number 1, any of the devices should be reachable from my DAW. This means that I should be able to sequence any of the hardware synthesizers straight from my DAW on the PC. Number 2, the DAW is my main clock source, and the sync with devices that can receive MIDI clock should be rock solid. And the last one, the devices with onboard sequencers should be able to control any of the other synths. Basically, I was going for the most flexible and practical setup I could come up with. Interestingly enough, the devices that make this setup possible are not the ones that make any sound or have any knobs that I can tweak. In fact, I don't even see them very often. They're hidden in the desk with the rest of the cables and just quietly do their thing. These devices are Expert Slippers USAMO, the Midi merge box, and the Midi Thru box. Let's talk about clock first. The Expert Slippers USAMO, which stands for Universal Sample Accurate MIDI Output, is what gives me the stable clock. Getting a stable clock from your DAW through a USB audio MIDI interface is very much a hit and miss territory. You may get lucky and have stable clock, but in majority of the cases, the clock fluctuates just enough to make it unstable and therefore unusable. The Expert Slippers USAMO is one of the most budget-friendly options that I found. It is a no-frills audio rate clock source, which works together with the VST that runs in the digital audio workstation. It does not rely on the USB audio MIDI interface, which is often the source of clock jitter and instability. The VST provides an audio signal which is a series of clicks coming at a very high rate, and the USAMO box converts that pulse to MIDI clock. Because the audio signal is coming from the DAW, it is always in sync with the DAW's tempo. This means that the resulting MIDI clock is rock solid. There are a few alternatives to this. One of them is ERM multi-clock, although that device is much more complex, has a lot more features, and is really aimed for much bigger studios than what I have. It is also a lot more expensive. The MIDI merge box is what allows me to combine several MIDI signals into one. It takes the MIDI signal from all the sequencers, including the PC, merges it into one signal and makes it available for all the other devices. The Thru box is great to have if you need to send MIDI data to more than 2 or 3 devices. It is possible to daisy chain MIDI connections using MIDI Thru port on the devices, but this works as long as you don't have too many devices in the chain. After 3 or 4 devices, the signal starts getting worse, some latency may be introduced, which may result in devices that are at the end of the chain getting out of sync. A MIDI Thru box eliminates this problem by taking the original MIDI signal and splitting it up so that each device gets its own connection. So having explained these 3 essential devices, we can now talk about how everything is connected. Using the MIDI merge box, I combine 3 different MIDI sequencers into one signal, My MIDI sequencers are the PC itself, which is running propeller head reason, the Arturia KeyStep Pro, and Elektron Digitakt. I could use Syntakt as a sequencer as well. Both Syntakt and Digitakt have identical MIDI capabilities, but since I only have a few synths to control, and since the Digitakt has 8 dedicated MIDI tracks, it is a better option in this case. The KeyStep Pro gets the clock from USAMO, so it is always in sync with the reason. Elektron boxes use Elektron overbridge to stay in sync, and I must say that it just works. I have never had an Elektron device go out of sync. All the synths are set up with their dedicated MIDI channels, and by addressing those channels from any of the sequencers, I can program patterns on those synths. The added benefit of having KeyStep Pro connected like this is that I can also use it as a MIDI controller for both Digitakt and Syntakt. One other thing worth mentioning about the setup is that it is very easy to expand. If I were to say get another synth, I would only need to connect it to the MIDI Thru box, and it would be immediately available to all my sequencers. Likewise, if I were to get another sequencer, not that I need another sequencer, but you never know, I would plug it into the MIDI merge box, and it would be able to drive any of the other synths in the studio. Not having to completely rewire the studio every time I get a new device is a huge plus. Alright, now let's talk about audio. If I had an outboard mixer desk with outboard effects and pedals, this diagram would be much more complex. But as it stands, I don't have any of that. I heavily rely on Reason's mixer and effects. All of the synths and samplers with analog outputs are directly connected to my audio interface. The Elektron boxes are connected via USB and overbridge, so that I can monitor and record each track as individual channel. The EMU sampler has a dedicated line-in connection for sampling, and using Reason's flexible routing, I can send any sound or group of sounds into the sampler. This has been a great workflow hack for me, because I use this quite often for resampling. For monitoring, I use KRK Studio monitors. They are connected through SonarWorks room correction software. In addition to monitors, I rely on headphones because my room is far from perfect, hence the studio name. One pair of headphones is mimicking the output of the studio monitors, also running through the SonarWorks correction software, and the second pair is connected to a different output in the audio interface, and it runs through RealPhone's room simulation software. Obviously, having all of this working through Reason requires some setting up, and for that I use my custom Reason template, which makes all of the gear ready to go every time I open a new project. If you're interested in a video which explains the template and how it works, please let me know in the comments. This setup was not created on the first attempt. It took me several tries before I realized that if I want a flexible solution, I will need to invest at least some money in specialized gear. The devices like USAMO and MIDI boxes are not very exciting and are not always easy to rationalize spending money on, but they really do make a huge difference and unlock the full potential of your other gear. Hopefully this video was informative and useful to you guys. Please tell me how you wire your studio, which mistakes you have made, and which life hacks you have learned. Until next time, take care.